Hi, my name is Matt, and this is Passback, a channel dedicated to the world of freestyle footbag. What is footbag, you ask? Well, stick around for a bit to learn about an entire sport you probably never even knew existed and how it relates to hacky sack. Hacky sack has been a household name in the United States for close to 40 years, and most people who grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s are familiar with the game of circle kicking among a group of people. Though its popularity has waned in the past decade, you can still catch references to it in TV shows, movies, video games, and even your local crossword puzzle. What most people don't know is that parallel to the rise of hacky sack has been the underground development of the related sport of freestyle footbag. As you might have guessed, I am a footbag player, and what's the difference between hacky sack and footbag is one of the most common questions I get. There are a few different ways to approach it, so let's start with the terms themselves. Hacky sack is what is known as a generic trademark, which is a branded term that has become synonymous with the product it represents due to its popularity and commonality. You see and use generic trademarks all the time, probably without even realizing it. To name a few, Kleenex for tissues, Post-it for sticky notes, and Q-tips for cotton swabs. Hacky sack is the original and most popular brand of the generic object footbag and has been owned by the toy company Wham-O since the early 80s.
Hacky sack is a brand name. The generic word is footbag, and there's all kinds of them on the market.
Concerning other brands, it's a bit of a toss-up if they use the term hacky sack or footbag, but if you use a microscope, you can in fact see the term footbag on hacky sack's logo. That's right, suburban dads. Every hacky sack you've ever seen has secretly been a footbag this whole time. Okay, so yes, due to the trademark, every hacky sack is technically a footbag. However, it's not quite as simple as saying that the two are synonymous. Hacky sack and footbag are related but distinct activities, much like longboarding and skateboarding. There are broad similarities in the objects and basic motions, but the more you dig into each, the more nuanced differences you find in the equipment, styles of play, and culture. Hacky sack, as most know, is generally thought of as kicking a bag in a hack circle, with the goal of keeping the hack out without using your hands and getting into a rhythm with the whole group. Freestyle footbag is a trick-based sport played by individuals with the goal of performing tricks by circling the bag with their legs. It's true that hacky sack and low-level footbag, that is to say, kicking, are more or less identical, but that's pretty much where the similarities end. Footbag is more focused on the individual and probably has more in common with juggling in terms of object manipulation and body movement, or skateboarding in terms of the breadth and intricacies of tricks than with hacky sack. A typical hacky sack and footbag look like this and are constructed to serve slightly different needs, with hacky sacks being focused more on kicking and footbags more focused on stalling. In addition to the general styles of play, the group aspects of hacky sack and footbag further distinguish the two. While both are often played in a circle of people with a heavy emphasis on the group, the communal aspects are expressed quite differently. In a typical hack circle, the entire group is working together to keep the hacky sack off the ground and possibly trying to get everyone to kick it before it drops. In a typical footbag circle, players take turns with the bag to individually do a combination of tricks, play until they drop, then pass to the next person for their turn. Though players in the circle don't go simultaneously, the communal aspect comes from influencing each other with trick and combo ideas. The taking turn style will sometimes get footbag players labeled as bag hogs or even accused of playing wrong, but it's just a different style of play. Upon learning about footbag for the first time and seeing that it's focused on performing tricks, people will often ask if there are competitions. We'll talk more in detail in other videos, but yes, there are indeed footbag tournaments held all over the world with several competitive events. Most events have some aspect of technicality, creativity, or artistry, similar to a skateboarding best trick contest or a gymnastics floor routine. At this point, I'm sure it will come as no surprise to hear that, while footbag is a very fun sport, it can be taken quite seriously by those who play it. However, footbag tends to not be taken very seriously by the general public, and this often stems from the stereotypes surrounding hacky sack. Before I get into it, I want to say the majority of people in the footbag community, myself included, have no problem with hacky sack and people who play it. Footbag players, like me, often started by playing hacky sack themselves, which is how they discovered and transitioned into playing footbag. Most footbag players also really like the circle kicking aspect, and you can often find a more traditional hack circle at footbag tournaments. That being said, there are a number of negative stereotypes associated with hacky sack, especially in the US, that get imprinted onto footbag players, such as no one has a job, having too much time on their hands, not being worth the effort, things like that. I could talk for an hour about what certain people deem to be worthy of one's time, but I had a lot of fun when I played hacky sack, and I'm appreciative of the game and the fact that it led me to discovering footbag. However, I get frustrated when people try to delegitimize footbag by pushing these stereotypes and saying things like it's only hacky sack, or brush off the skill and athleticism required to play it. To go back to my earlier comparison, nobody criticizes longboarding or skateboarding simply because of the existence of the other, and they shouldn't with hacky sack and footbag either. Like skateboarding, footbag is unquestionably a sport that takes a great deal of effort and skill, no matter how many times some guy at the park tries to tell me otherwise.
It's a sport, so I need water.
Because of this desire to be taken more seriously or have their efforts recognized, footbag players can come off as a little elitist. This doesn't mean that they want to disassociate from hacky sack itself, just the stereotypes it carries. As for stereotypes going the other way, footbag players can have a bad habit of viewing hacky sack players as just footbag players who haven't figured that out yet, without seeing them as part of a distinct culture.
The very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy.
While there probably are a number of hacky sack players who would enjoy playing footbag once they learn about it, it's just as unfair of footbag players to push their culture onto hacky sack as it is for society to push hacky sack stereotypes onto footbag. To talk about the two terms, when I was younger and dumber, I used to get pretty bent out of shape when someone assumed I was playing hacky sack, which was a lot of teenage frustration due to nobody knowing or caring about this thing that I was so excited about. But obviously that doesn't make any sense. Most people are seeing footbag for the first time and wouldn't know to call it anything other than hacky sack. These days the term has a pretty neutral effect on me, unless someone tries to use it in a derogatory manner like I mentioned before, and as long as somebody is interested, I'm happy to tell them more about footbag. As far as the term footbag goes, I've heard some people criticize it for being too literal, but nobody seems to have problems with the terms baseball, basketball, or football, so I think footbag is just fine for the name of this sport. So, as you can see, although hacky sack and footbag have their similarities, the styles and cultures have diverged enough to warrant their different names, and ultimately I think they can coexist just fine. People are going to continue to play hacky sack because it's a fun game that you can easily get into, and the sport of footbag will continue to progress no matter how underground it remains. Of course, as a footbag player, I would love for more people to know about and play footbag, which is kind of the whole purpose of this channel, to spread my knowledge and love of footbag with more people, and now you're one of them. Maybe you're interested enough to give it a try yourself, or maybe now you'll just know what that guy in the gym is doing that looks like really intense hacky sack.